Yeah.
Your new show, Leaving a Mark, a show about scars. Thank you for having me on, by the way, a couple weeks ago. It was a blast.
My pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about that, the premise of it, and how you came to start this up.
I started this, like everything in my life. I started a long time ago. If anyone ever wants to know, whenever I get asked to be taken out for coffee by a new comic, and they're like, I just want to, pick your brain. I'm like, would you like to know the longest path between A and B? Because that's my journey. So I started on this show a long time ago. And it's when I say scars, it's real. I have scars all over my body. A huge number of them are from surgeries from a car accident I survived when I was a kid. Others are from some other smaller but memorable accidents. And I also have one from breast cancer surgery. And so I made this as funny as I could for stuff that is intense and traumatic, but a lot of it is funny because I had a lot of these scars on my body most of my life. And so it really influenced who I was. And you don't see them on me, but they're on my torso. So that when I was like sleeping around with guys and having sex and just even discovering that, it played a big part in how I was trying to navigate that world. So I have a lot of stories about these along the way. And I decided to put it all together because I know many of us have scars of all different varieties or intensities. And a lot of them come from wild crap that happened in your childhood that's even just, playground stuff or, slight parental negligence stuff where something bad happened. The parents are like, we're not going to the hospital. And they're like, or drunken misadventures or stuff happens to people when they travel or, brawls with nature, to a lot of course, medical, surgical, life-saving stuff. So I wanted to kind of put together my story. And then there is a portion, which you were involved, where I go to the audience and I get them to have a competition with their scars, which was so fun and revealing every time.
Yeah.
And then I brought someone else up, you as a special guest, to talk about their scar, because the other thing I noticed is nobody has even the smallest scar on their body and points at it and goes, I don't know. I don't remember anything. They pointed at a tiny scar and they're like, it was a sunny day, middle of March. Like, it's so specific. They remember what they wore.
Yeah.
So I put all this together, and it is a narrative about me. And I don't accept all my scars, just so you know. In this show, I talk about some of them that I've accepted and some of them that I haven't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was blown away watching it from several different aspects. One of them, I think it's great that you open it up to the audience, because something like that, you start talking about injuries and scars, it's an instant knee-jerk reaction to compare and contrast. So if you were to talk about all this stuff and not open it up to the audience, I feel like they would have a hard time concentrating on the rest of the show, because it immediately triggers. Yes. It immediately triggers all these, flashbacks and these moments. So to be able to do it, it's a brilliant idea. Kind of like gets it out of the way.
It's so fun. It's so fun because I feel like nobody talks to people about their scars.
Yeah. Because it's also, we notice them on each other. If they're in a visible area, you notice them. But it's also kind of, we're taught from a social standpoint of like, don't ask somebody what's that from. Wherever somebody does ask me what mine is from, I'm always like, hey, good for you. Like, I would be curious too,
Yeah, you never know what. And it's, of course, if anyone has ever asked me about my scar, I'm like, oh, I'm almost more impressed that they noticed to ask.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Same here. Yeah. But yeah, I think that you putting it out to the audience like that immediately it makes it this very kind of cohesive thing where everybody's on the same page, everybody's kind of included in it. I think that's great. And then when you start talking about all your scars, I was like, Jesus Christ, this woman is like the Terminator. Like, I cannot believe the amount of shit that you have endured and walked away from.
Yeah,
It blew my
thank you. I
mind.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. Sometimes when I fail on stage and leave, I'm like, why is this still affecting me? Shouldn't I have more resilience than this after everything? No, still
Right, right.
human.
Yeah.
Still human.
You use it, yeah. You use it as a plea. Lift up your shirt. I'm a survivor, god damn it.
Right? I know. If only, I mean, after that, people just be like, that scary woman was on stage.
So you do that every show though. That's an integral part of the show is opening up to the crowd before you kind
Yeah.
of get into your own
And it's
various.
different. It's different every night, which I love. And I love, as I'm sure, I don't know, actually, do you like talking to the crowd in your act? You do, right? A little bit?
I feel like yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I feel like in like when you're doing like a 10-15 minute set around the city, that's so little time that you kind of want to, in the grand scheme of things, I never set out to do stand up thinking I want to know where people are from and how long this couple has been married.
Sure.
Like that was never the goal. Like you have an idea that you think is funny that you want to convey to people. Now things have gone the course where crowd work is so ubiquitous, and it seems like that's all that anybody wants
I
to
know.
watch on TikTok. That like I
Well,
feel like
that's what's happening. Yep.
and I feel like I've seen so many comics that have great material kind of abandon that material and then just kind of present these questions to the audience, just hoping to get some,
Some
clippable
fodder.
content,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It started off because comics didn't want to burn their material by putting it all online. And then it was like, but if I want to pitch this for a late night spot, can I? If I want to put this in my special, like it's already gone. I don't even know if that's true anymore because we consume the stuff so quickly and furiously. But then it just became all crowd work that was up there for that reason. It really was to save people so their material was still their own, only to be experienced live or how they wanted to put it up. But then it set up a different expectation with an audience that maybe has never even been to a comedy club where they're like, this is what it is. And now the
Yeah.
two, it's like talking about a dragon snake chasing, eating its own tail. I was going to say a dragon. Too many kids' books.
Too many. Yeah.
And I like talking to the crowd, I will say, and I do it sparingly. Of course, I host a lot. So there is an expectation in some places that you do a lot of that. I don't do all of it because I too love writing material.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in this case, I want to do more crowd work in the Scars show. I want to figure out when I remount it how to actually have it a few more times in the show, because gathering these small stories from people, I was like, I don't know if I've ever done crowd work like this where it's thematic. Like you're like, we're not, I don't care where you're from. I don't care what your job is. Nothing. We're talking about this specific theme.
Yeah.
And I need 3 or 4 stories from you. And it's interesting because the people, it's just so many, some people just freely admitted in that public forum some really vulnerable personal stuff, which I love. I invite, I'll take care of them. We're good. And then other people have really just like the most, you couldn't even make it up. Like someone was mentioned that they have this divot right in between their eyes. There's their scar right in between their eyes. And it's from having like a stereo system and trying to they wanted to pry open a speaker because they thought they could mess with the wires to make it sound better. And
sounds like a carjacking gone wrong.
I know. And instead of getting a tool, they were just trying to use a butter knife. And basically from the action of trying to leverage it in there to pop it out, it just, the force of it just made their hand and the knife just go right between their eyes and they carved out. And you're just like, that is, how else would we have ever gotten to that story?
Yeah.
That's what I loved about it. And sometimes people came up to me afterwards and said, I was like, oh yeah, I don't have any scars. And at the end, they were like, oh, I totally have scars.
Yeah. That's so funny that the butter knife thing, because that's pretty much what happened to my dad to a certain extent. Years before I was born, this is maybe 20 years before I was born. He was grilling. It was like a 4th of July cookout. He was grilling some burgers, and he was using one of those 2-prong barbecue forks, and he was trying to flip the burgers with one of those, and he caught it on the grill and tried to jimmy it loose, and it sprung out of his hand and popped him in the eye, and he lost the eye. He has a glass eye. He's had a glass eye for the last 60 years.
Barbecue accident.
Yeah. Yep.
Shit.
From stabbing himself in the eye. So, like, I have my scar on my face. He has this thing. My son, when he was 2.5, and this is the thing, even people, even comics that are on the show, like, I was talking about one scar in particular, but, like, I started going through this whole Rolodex of freak accidents that have happened throughout my family, My son, when he was 2.5, stabbed himself in the eye with a stick. He was running with a stick and fell, and it went this deep into his eye. Luckily, it went in the corner, and it didn't do any damage to the eyeball itself, but it severed his tear duct. He had to have emergency surgery. He had an eye patch for 3 days.
Were you freaking out?
Oh, it was terrifying. Terrifying.
Yeah. All right, here's my Mother of the Year story. And I'm just going to preface by saying it's by no comparison, because it is what happened to my son is very minor, but it's just happened. I was on my way to Austin, Texas to do some comedy, and while I am in the Delta Lounge, I will admit, I was in the Delta Lounge, and
bragging.
I got a call from my husband that the school called that our son had fallen at recess and his head was bleeding a lot. And my husband got there, and so I was already freaking out. I'm like, what do I do? Do I? But I was like, okay, tell me, like, look at him and tell me what the deal is. And then he was like, he's going to need stitches. And I was freaking out. And it did seem like it was fairly under control and that it wasn't a big cut, but it was a deep cut. But I guess my husband was freaking out, and he was kind of trying to put on a better tone for me over the phone that was also trying to assess things. And in the end, like, he only needed 3 stitches, and I decided to take my trip. But there was a moment there in the Delta. I felt guilty, and I almost did not have another mimosa. But I felt so conflicted about everything. I mean, my life, his life, scars, me not working, career. Everything just came crashing in that moment.
Yeah.
Of just and then I got over it, and he's fine, and the stitches are dissolving, which is just amazing to me. I forgot that that's what happens now.
Mm-hmm.
And he will have a scar. And anytime I mention that to someone, they go, "Oh, that's so, you just wrote a show about that and did a show. That's great. Now he has a," and I'm like, you know what my goal in life is? No more stories. Like, it's one thing to have survived trauma and to work on it, and it's part of your life, and you have a certain distance and acceptance of it, or you're even working on it to be able to make it into something fit for entertainment. I'm not doing therapy with that show. It's supposed to be for entertainment.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking for a new chapter.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You got all these other ones. You want the rest of your life to be the most boring existence possible.
Exactly. No more stories.